Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
And again, we are spending some time today looking at issues in the news. It is, of course, our weekend edition. And, of course, we are, I think, at 35 or more days of a government shutdown. After a while, the numbers almost don't matter anymore, because we are setting a record for the longest shutdown in the history of the federal government. And, of course, we thought that next week we'd have a State of the Union address. Penna Dexter, I guess that didn't turn out, did it?
I guess not. And, you know, I'm just kind of okay with it. I thought that trying to do this somewhere else that wasn't as majestic and historic and traditional as the House chambers would have been maybe anticlimactic. I think it shows that President Trump actually is really wanting to get this solved, the shutdown solved, and that the Democrats perhaps are not so anxious to do so, even though their rhetoric states that they are. So I'm okay with it. I think it'll happen. There'll be a State of the Union address, and as Trump says, it'll be really good.
Dr. Merrill Matthews with us as well with IPI. And as a matter of fact, we've posted 2 of his articles today. But, you know, we had votes yesterday in the Senate. I predicted, and that wasn't even a real obvious problem to predict, that both of them would go down to defeat. One that would have $5.7 billion for the wall. The other one would be just what's called a clean CR, which wouldn't have any of it. And so here we are, continuing each day to mark one more day of a shutdown and the impact that it's having on some of these government employees. Now, they would have had their, second paycheck today?
Yes, I believe that's second paycheck today. What if you didn't give a State of the Union and nobody cared? I thought to myself when it was off, that means I get one more free night. I don't have to worry about that stuff.
You and I, over the years, have done a few of those.
We have done a few
with
of
you
those.
and apart from you, and I understand that only so well. And I think it's important to point out for our younger listeners, or those who are constitutionally illiterate, which might be a lot of the audience, that the State of the Union hasn't always been verbally given.
Right.
It was verbally given for a while, and from about Thomas Jefferson to Woodrow Wilson, it was just written out and sent in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it might be that case again.
It certainly might be. Roger Stone has been in the news. We'll get to that in the next hour, but we have posted some very good articles here. One I want to talk about in just a few minutes with Penna Dexter, because we had a lot of people asking questions about the law in New York on abortion. But also, Dr. Merrill Matthews, we got a couple of others. One of those I called Democratic Socialism as a Loser, or this was kind of a counterpoint, and you were the con. With the economy humming, progressivism, that is democratic socialism, is a likely loser. Everybody, even some of the liberal outlets now, are talking about the fact that the Democratic Party is very different than it was just 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I was just listening to NPR on the way over here, and they were having that discussion. And the host said, this is a very different Democratic Party than it was, say, 20 years ago. And the person said, well, really, maybe 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. It is changing dramatically. And it's not clear that they're going to drag a lot of the Democrats along with that. And I think you had some Trump Democrats. You know, we used to talk about Reagan Democrats. I think they had some Trump Democrats who normally would vote Democratic and shifted over to vote for Donald Trump. And now you've got a situation where I think you're going to find Donald Trump, I think his best asset going into the 2020 election is that the Democrats are moving so far to the left that he will seem reasonable by comparison.
Is this, Buddy, do you think in the next presidential election, is this one of those cases where the left could win a lot of primaries, and especially the presidential primary. And, because you have sort of that activism among the primary voters. But then when you get to the general, it's really going to hurt them.
I think that's entirely possible. That's 2 years off, so we don't know what's going to happen between now and then. But I think it's entirely possible that you get the left of the left moving in the Democratic Party. You're already seeing a number of the state Democratic parties adopting the far left agenda that I think most Democrats will go with. And so you have a far left Democratic candidate as the nominee, and voters out there, especially in the middle, because Pew has released a poll on this, and roughly 35% of the public consider themselves conservative, about 35% independent, only 26% consider themselves liberal, and we're now talking about the liberals liberal in the Democratic Party. So I think that alienates a lot of people, and may say Donald Trump is a more reasonable alternative.
When you think about it, Bernie Sanders probably would have won the nomination, but the party machinery made sure that Hillary was the nominee.
He may win it next time.
And who would the party machinery get behind now in the Democrat Party?
I have not a clue.
I don't have a clue
Joe
yet.
Biden, closest you could come up with.
Yeah.
Maybe Joe Biden, who
Maybe.
is significantly older. I mean, Donald Trump pushed the limits on the age, but Joe Biden's 3 or 4 or 5 years older than Donald Trump. So. But on the other hand, their leaders, Nancy Pelosi's what, I think 78. Steny Hoyer's around that same age. I mean, it's the irony here is the Democratic Party, the energy is all in the young millennials, but it's being run by seniors who've been on Medicare for 20 years.
And let's, this is, I hope, was going to also set aside a myth. And I saw it the other day in the Washington Post. They were talking about the so-called millennial vote and the iGen vote. And they had some individuals saying, well, I just decided I couldn't be a Republican because they've moved so far right. And yet I have said, and try me out to see if I've missed something here, you can look at the Republican Party platform, let's take in 2000 when George W. Bush was elected, and compare it to the one that we just had in 2016, and it is virtually indistinguishable. You can go to the party platform for even Barack Obama in 2008 and compare that to 2016 and see a suggestion, and when it's in 2020, I mean, it's going to be so different. I mean, I don't think words like Green New Deal were in there.
Medicare
for all were in there. I mean,
free college tuition.
So who moved? I don't think the Republicans moved. Their platform is virtually identical. The Democratic platform is going to be so different that you would think they would be two different parties.
You could make the case that the Republican Party has actually moved to the center from the Tea Party time because Donald Trump's embrace of tariffs and so forth, that's typically been a Democratic position. A number of things that he has approached and one of the reasons why I think he won Michigan and Wisconsin and so forth was an embrace of some Democratic elements with regard to tariffs and trade. So the Republican Party is sort of in the middle or moving to the middle a little bit where the Democrats are. We can't even see him right now.
Well, we're getting back from the break. One of the other things you pointed out is it's very difficult to beat an incumbent president. You know, Jimmy Carter, George Herbert Walker Bush are the exceptions because it's only happened 5 times in 30 presidential elections since the last turn of the century, 1900. So we want to talk about that a little bit. And even for listeners saying, why are you talking about the presidential election? Because this time next year, you will have already had at least a caucus and maybe a primary. So it's not as far off as you think. And let's see, certainly Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, essentially Bernie Sanders, and a lot of no-names that I can't even come up with.
Joaquin Castro.
Joaquin Castro, and some of them have already put together either exploratory groups or actually have announced. So
and raising money.
and Beto, he's out there wandering around right now.
I think Kamala got $1.5 million, I think, in 24 hours after she announced.
Yeah. But Robert Francis O'Rourke is on the road, but he might run too, but at the moment he's just on a kind of a lone beatnik tour. So we want to talk about all of that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Earlier this month, I turned on the Tucker Carlson television program and heard him deliver a monologue that lasted nearly 15 minutes. It became the monologue heard around the conservative world, and nearly every commentator has had negative things to say about his comments. But I want to do just the opposite. Sure, there were things that he said that were incorrect or overstated, but I want to affirm many of the things he said that were right on target and lost in some of the critical comments about his commentary. A few minutes after criticizing Utah Senator Mitt Romney, he wonders why we have so many deaths of despair in a country where the economy is booming and many people are doing well financially. He says bluntly, anyone who thinks the health of a nation can be summed up in GDP is an idiot. The real goal for America, he believes, should not be more prosperity. The goal should be happiness. The key ingredients might be such things as dignity, self-control, independence, and deep relationships with other people. Many of his critics say Carlson gets off track by blaming the elites and promoting a type of victimhood populism. While that may be true, don't miss his accurate diagnosis. If more material goods would make us happy, then Americans should be some of the happiest people on the planet. They should be the happiest people in the history of the world. The median family income for Americans is the highest ever, even when adjusted for inflation. Yet we're lonely and depressed. Drug overdose deaths are at an all-time high, and these pathologies are not only in urban America, but also in rural America. Politics and government policies aren't going to change this dysfunction. These are cultural and spiritual problems. Tucker Carlson's diagnosis is generally accurate, and we Christians know there's only one answer: the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From SkyPass Entertainment, The Least of These, The Graham Staines Story. The Least of These, rated PG-13, in theaters February 1st. TheLeastOfThese.movie.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
One of the articles we posted here today is by Dr. Merrill Matthews. And again, of course, you can go to ipi.org and find any of his. But this particular one is actually from the Post Bulletin, so I wanted you to be able to find it easily. And again, you say your father's Democratic Party might have a good chance at capturing the White House in 2020. Your children's Democratic Party, pun intended, children, they need some adult supervision, faces a tougher fight. And we just mentioned a few: Medicare for all, free college tuition, guaranteed basic income, abolish ICE. I noticed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did not vote for opening the government again because it would allow the funding of ICE, which is amazing.
Generally open borders.
Yeah, immigration and customs enforcement, a living wage, $15 an hour, and Green New Deal. So there's 6 right there.
Other than that.
Yeah. and let's just think about this for a minute. In the last Democratic platform, were any of those 6 in there? Maybe a guaranteed family income, but that shows you how radically this change has taken place in, 2 years?
Yes, and I think the other side of that equation is how do you pay for it? And I don't think, broadcasting
now
70%.
you're letting the forest get in the way of the tree. You're seeing the forest.
Yeah, but
besides,
70% tax.
The Earth is going to to be destroyed in 12
Right.
years, so we shouldn't ask about
All
it.
right.
Yeah. Did you see that quote the other day from her?
I did.
Anyway, go back, Penn. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
She's definitely getting the attention.
Yeah.
And, one of the pieces of her rhetoric is 70% tax rate and how all these millionaires shouldn't be allowed to exist and all of that. And, to me, if anything's going to drive Democrats away, it's that.
I would think. Maybe I'm missing something here.
Well, she's proposed a 70% tax rate on the top 10 million, I think, 10 million above. And Elizabeth Warren is out today or yesterday with her asset tax. So she's not just taxing income; she wants to tax assets at, I believe it was 1% over people who for people who made over $50 million have over $50 million in assets. She wants to
1%
tax
of their
them,
assets?
Percent of the assets, right. And 3% on something even higher if you made even higher, more than that. So hers is an asset tax as opposed to just a income tax.
I know.
Which becomes essentially asset forfeiture, because you're taking away there. You'd have to come up and say, hey, this is how much money I have or income or wealth I have, and then you'd have to pay a percentage on that.
Think about that, Penna. You and I have talked over the years about the problem that we had with the death tax, because the family farm wouldn't have enough assets. They'd have to sell off the farm to pay the taxes.
Right.
But if the family farm is an asset, you'd be selling off the farm before anybody died.
Yeah,
right?
investments having to be sold early and all of that. If it was an annual tax on assets.
It's an interesting time and an interesting proposal, but I would guess it's probably just the opening bid, because I think she has 1% and 3% based upon the assets, and if you're going to outleft each other as you move to the left, you got to come up with something even more than that. So, interesting thing is though. I've often been critical of some of the things that President Obama proposed, because he didn't include assets. For instance, on subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, you could have worked and set aside a lot of money, retired at say 55 or 56, have significant assets but no income,
right,
and be eligible for taxpayer subsidies on something like that. And I've had people complain that, well, I've got a friend who did this, and she's got she's a millionaire, and yes, she's getting subsidies from taxpayers for her Affordable Care Act policy. So there may be a reason on whether or not you're going to get benefits to bring in that issue, but that's not what Elizabeth Warren wants to do.
Well, and you said something in passing I want to camp on for just a minute. Out-liberal someone else. Okay, so this is what Elizabeth Warren has said. I think you can kind of say, Bernie Sanders will go even further. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez will go even further. We get Cory Booker in there. We get Kamala Harris. I mean, after a while, it's not like they go to the middle. During primaries, they go like this, right? And it just could get so crazy out there by this time next year.
And there's a reason for this. It's the media only likes to cover the ones that are really coming out with even more bizarre proposals. And it's like the climate change issue. If you have a climate change model, and your model comes up and says, yeah, the Earth's probably going to continue with a very slight increase, as it has done since the Ice Age, since the end of the Ice Age. But we'll probably be able to manage it. No, you're not going to get any attention. You get attention when you come out with your climate change model says we're all going to die in 12 years. That's when the media covers you. And so it's the same thing on their policies. If you come out with a moderate, responsible thing about how we're going to do tax reform or something like that, they don't care. They want to find the proposals that are very far to the left, because that's what they love.
And you wonder why Donald Trump tweets the way he tweets.
And to even focus this a little bit more, some people say, yeah, but you're still talking about primaries that don't happen until January, February next year. They've already scheduled, essentially, the first Democrat debate in June.
Yes.
In June. Now, we used to roll
June of this year?
June of this year. Just a few months from now. To drive
That's so
that
they can
home.
have time to get all 50 candidates.
And see, they're facing the same problem. Remember, of course,
Right.
Let's go back 2 years where we had an August debate, remember, in the Republican Party, just to try to weed a little bit of this out, because
We didn't weed for a long time.
Yeah.
Took
You
a
had
while.
the adult table and the children's table. Now you're going to have all the children's table if you want to keep Dr. Merrill Matthews' illustration. But you're going to have, I'm seeing people announce I've never heard of, that just are going to probably not get too far, but will obviously deserve, if they could even get 1% of the people in their particular area to say that they might vote for them or get enough signatures to get on the ballot. So this has been a problem on the Republican side when we had 17, but I know you're going to probably have at least that many on the Democrat side.
But in fairness, most people had not heard of Barack Obama.
Very true.
Before when he decided to announce that he wanted to run, and of course Kamala Harris is sort of in the same position, having just recently come into the Senate and wants to go further. So she actually has probably a longer record of public service and more of a record than Barack Obama had.
Isn't that something? Now, again, one of the things you talked about here is there is a reason why some incumbent presidents have been defeated. Jimmy Carter was dealing with an economy that was a disaster, high inflation, interest rates, and Iranian hostage debacle. And you can go through kind of the long list of others. And, of course, just Bill Clinton maybe have won if it hadn't been for Ross Perot. So
also just no new taxes.
No new taxes.
Read my lips.
And all those kinds of things.
There were several problems with this campaign, so I had limited space there. So you had
to we could have had a whole paragraph or two on that. You had enough there, but again, Perot siphoned off 19% of the vote. But the economy, as you point out in your headline, is doing pretty well. Now, I know Americans, when I say, what are you doing for me recently? You know, if a year from now the economy starts tanking, maybe they're not as interested. But the bottom line is right now, with record unemployment, with the median family income when adjusted for inflation is higher than it's ever been before, stock market's going up and down, and we're probably going to have a bear market eventually. But still, that doesn't seem like a lot of good reasons to throw the rascal out, as they say.
As we mentioned, it's 2 years out yet. A lot can change between now and then in the economy and the world affairs and so forth. But if the economy manages to stay fairly strong, it's really hard to quote James Carville, it's the economy, stupid. It's really hard to be able to do that when the economy's doing well.
You know, one of the questions I have is about money, because all these candidates are coming out, and as you said, Kamala Harris already raised $150 million.
I think she got $1.5 million, I believe, in the first 24 hours. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's the race for the money. And so you have all these people, as you said, trying to out-liberal each other. But really the most liberal contingent is the millennials who most of them don't have that much money to give to political campaigns. So when you get to the end of this thing, is the money going to be a factor? The establishment will be able to pull in the dollars.
The irony here is the Democrats will be raising tons of money even as they run on defunding campaigns.
Really? Okay.
Getting the big money out of politics.
Usually the individual that raises the most money wins. Howard Dean was an exception, and there's a few others, but rarely is that the case. Money is still the mother's milk of politics.
Yes, it is.
Go ahead.
And I'm just going to say, the Tom Steyers of the world are going to be funneling money through both openly and probably through various channels to get money, dark money as they call it now, to get it to those, get it to the candidates. Even as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is complaining about the billionaires.
I know. You can roll your eyes all you want, but that's just the reality of what we've got. Anyway, we wanted to talk a little bit about this. This is a very good article, as always, by Dr. Merrill Matthews. We've got some others we're going to get to a little bit later, but I did want to spend some time on that. We come back, though, Penna Dexter, one of the things that everybody wanted to hear is how did we really evaluate the New York law on abortion? I had some people calling in, and I said, well, I'm sure she'll have some things to say about that. We've posted an article on that, and we'll talk about what is happening in New York right after this.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today. Penna Dexter, Dr. Merrill Matthews. A little bit later, Kelly Shackelford. I hope he's getting off a plane pretty soon here. Will join us as well. So we'll have a full roundtable of discussion. We'll postpone maybe a few of our religious liberty issues till he comes and sits in that next chair next to me here. But Penna, I know there have been a number of people that have specifically off the air and then even yesterday on the air saying, okay, I want to hear your comments about what happened in New York. The Reproductive Health Act was signed on the 46th anniversary of Roe versus Wade. That was significant. When it was passed in the legislature, there was applause. Then we've even in the article that you had suggested we might want to post, the One World Trade Center and the bridge and the Mario Cuomo Bridge and the Alfred E. Smith building in Albany all were actually bathed in pink light. And so we are dealing with perhaps the most draconian abortion bill that we've seen in our lifetime. Tell us more.
The lights on the One World Trade Center, it's sort of like, I think, an antenna or something that points up for a really long way.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like, somebody pointed out that looked like the needle that you would use to inject someone, and it was in pink. And, you know, it's really pretty disgusting. And I think the pro-lifers that I've read since this happened have just, they're sad. I mean, their hearts are broken over this because what it really does, it makes it easier to get late-term abortions in New York. And it does several things. It decriminalizes abortion. So in other words, if you were to hurt a woman and it killed the unborn baby, there would be no criminal penalty anymore. They took that away. And then abortions up to 24 weeks, which is 6 months. I mean, I know a lot of babies that have been born and survived well before 6 months.
Yes.
And these can be done not by a doctor. It doesn't have to.
That was
it can
the other
be
one. Yeah.
like nurse practitioners. Certain medical personnel can do these abortions up to 24 weeks, or even later if the baby is considered unviable. So it's definitely post viability abortions, and the babies who survive have lost now their protections in New York. So you don't have to save the baby anymore. And I think that. The health issue.
Yes.
If the mother's health,
Yeah.
it used to be if the mother's health was endangered, you could do an abortion in New York. Now it's if the mother's health can be harmed. It's, if you think about those two terms, endangered or can be harmed. I mean, you could stretch
Yes.
can be harmed to almost anything. I mean, really. So it's allowing women to be able to choose a third trimester abortion very easily and get one fairly easily. And I think the saddest thing about it, there's a video that's out there of the legislature once they passed it and the applause that took place and everybody standing up. It was pretty overwhelming. And it just makes me think about New York. And I mean, I know a lot of people in New York who are Christians. They must be so sad. There was one business owner who actually closed his business because just for a day he didn't want to pay taxes to the state of New York.
I saw that.
And it's really what it's doing is preparing for the day that Roe versus Wade is overturned, because
That's
New
the
York
argument.
will be ready.
Mm-hmm.
Now, other states who are pro-life are also going to be ready with their laws. But this is what we'll see if the day comes, and a lot of people think it will, in the near future, that Roe goes away. You still have a lot of abortions being done.
And that was the justification, is that, we might have Roe versus Wade overturned. I'd like to think that it's going to happen this term, but it won't, and it probably will not happen anytime soon. But if it does, then they sort of implement this. But that became a justification for decriminalizing various acts and reducing any kind of regulation. We've had various people on this program over the years that have said in many states you have more regulations in a cat or dog vet clinic than you do an abortion clinic. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, a good illustration of that. And even the lack of protection for a child that is born alive, you don't even have to save that either. So, Dr. Merle Matthews, what's your comments?
Well, we've been talking about the dramatic left shift of the Democratic Party. Do you remember when Bill Clinton, as a candidate, said, we want to keep abortion safe, legal, and rare? Mm-hmm. And he would stress the rare part, and he would get a round of applause then at the time. Now, I think that was mostly a political platitude as opposed to his real position. But it was, if you were moving in that direction, okay. But in fact, the Democrats are dropping the rare part.
Yes.
They're beginning to expand it now as they're wanting to expand to more of those far left options. So it's a sad day, but it's once again sort of an indication that the Democratic Party today, that it's not clear Bill Clinton could be elected on the platform of the Democratic Party today.
I would think so. Penna, one of the articles that we've posted, and I appreciate you suggesting this one, and it is, I think, our third article today, just reminds us that it's not like New York isn't already performing a lot of abortions. In 2016, performed, 82,000 abortions. That number's going to go up now, isn't it?
Yeah, nearly 1 in 3 births in New York end in abortion, and the more black babies are aborted than are born in New York City. So it's, there are already, as you said, a lot of abortions taking place. But this is sad. And, the governor, Andrew Cuomo, famously a Catholic, but he's gotten by being able to still take communion and stay in the church, even though he's been rapidly pro-abort. So I guess maybe some of the charade is dropping, and people are admitting it. And one of the things, and this was my commentary this week, is about Planned Parenthood. Their new president is proud. I mean, she's not wanting to be like Cecile Richards and say, we do a lot of health care for women. She's saying that our primary reason for existence and raising money is abortion. So she's doubling down on abortion, as are many Democrats today.
Let's talk about that, since we'll come back to it again later. But Dr. Wen really is going out of their way. And let's add that to the fact that if you've seen these videos of these abortion-minded women who've had abortions and then are talking to the kids about this. And all of this reminds me of years ago. The original host of Point of View was Marlon Maddox, and he had a guest on, I think at that time had been with National Review, and he said he was older than any of us around the table. Some of us were in college about this time or younger, but he was there really thinking about this issue because he was Catholic, and he said, when the decision came down of Roe versus Wade, I knew that would mean there would be some abortions. But I still figured it would be pretty rare because I figured most people would not want to march in the streets about abortion rights or even talk openly about their abortion rights. He couldn't even, of course, imagine that you would have YouTube videos where they talk about abortion with the kids, or that there would be applause in a legislature when you have these kind of abortion arguments. And nobody in 1973 realized what was being unloosed on the country, did they?
They didn't. I mean, this whole movement of shout for abortion is getting shout your abortion, not shout for abortion. Shout about your own abortion. I mean, we've had these Silent No More ladies who've talked about their abortion, grieving, the decision that they made, the loss of their child, the loss of perhaps their fertility. That's one thing, because that's a positive and that encourages people to take a different path. But this shout your abortion and celebrate it. And, I'm happy. I'm trying to get kids to get on board with this. It's just almost as disgusting as this law in New York City, maybe more.
Well, and also in your commentary, you talk about the fact that some say abortions are part of God's plan. And I'm starting to see these Facebook memes where you have members of the clergy blessing abortion clinics and things like that. Talk about sending a mixed message to our society today, thinking that, well, again, that's just what God intended for you to go get your abortion.
Well, I don't even have words for that one, but I will say, that's why it's really important for us, I think, as believers, to catechize our young people with regard to some of these issues that become political. I mean, marriage, we need to be teaching what marriage means. We need to teach about the sanctity of life in our churches. And I just am surprised even today, these are hot button issues, that churches, aren't spending more time on those things. And, they need to spell it out. Okay, this is what the Bible says. This is God's plan for, life. I mean, he created it. And so, I think there's really marching orders for churches and organizations that are teaching young people in the faith.
Well, I might just say this is a good action item. I suggested last week that last Sunday, which would be January 20th, would be a good Sanctity of Life Sunday because it's before the decision that came down on the 22nd. But what has happened on the 22nd with the signing of this particular law by Andrew Cuomo, the material that's on Penna Dexter's commentary about kids meet someone who's had an abortion, or, again, this is part of God's plan, or shout your abortion. You, on this Sunday, could still make the opportunity to be on the 27th of this Sunday. speak about the issue of the sanctity of human life. And if you didn't have enough to talk about last Sunday, you certainly do after this week, right? And so those are some topics we'll get to. When we come back, would like to get some real brief comments around the table. Some Catholic young boys that were at the pro-life march were vilified, and in one particular case, Nathan Sandman has been in the news simply because he was sort of feeling awkward, so he smiled, and everybody attributed that to a smirk and the fact that he was confronting a Native American. We now know the rest of the story, and we'll talk about that right after this.
Planned Parenthood's former president, Cecile Richards, downplayed abortion as her organization's core activity. She famously maintained that abortion only makes up 3% of Planned Parenthood's services, and that the organization is focused primarily on women's health. We expected Planned Parenthood's new president, Leanna Wen, a medical doctor, to continue in this mode, but she recently blasted media outlets Planned Parenthood has long depended on to underplay its abortion activity. She says they are misconstruing her vision for Planned Parenthood. Our core mission, she tweeted, is providing, protecting, and expanding access to abortion and reproductive health care. We will never back down from that fight. Why such honesty? Perhaps Dr. Wen now feels she's free from the need to insist, as her predecessor did, that women in certain areas of the country won't get necessary female health services unless Congress keeps taxpayer dollars flowing to Planned Parenthood. Those monies are probably safe for now, since Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she'll wield a pro-choice gavel. So Dr. Wen can drop the ruse. This theme of transparency is also taking hold in pro-abortion activism. A group called Shout Your Abortion seeks to portray abortion as a social good. Shout Your Abortion recently released a video with the title, Kids Meet Someone Who Has Had an Abortion. It's an episode of Kids Meet, a show put out for children by Cut.com. In it, Shout Your Abortion's co-founder, Amanda Bonow, attempts to convince several children that they should celebrate abortion with her. She tells them, abortions are part of God's plan. Uncomfortable, sort of like a yucky dental appointment. But afterwards, she felt, quote, grateful that I wasn't pregnant anymore. She asked one child, do we want people to have all those babies? When he suggests adoption as a solution, she tells him, adoption would make her feel like, quote, I am forced to create life. Such an evil effort to make abortion palatable to children. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, it is Weekend Edition, and Penna Dexter and Dr. Merrill Matthews with us. Kelly Shackelford will join us shortly, we hope. And I did want to get some comments, because this time last week, Penna, you know, we were talking about the March for Life on Friday. We recognized it probably wouldn't get a lot of coverage, and it didn't. And then you had the Women's March, which got a little more coverage. But very quickly, something overshadowed both of those, and that is that very edited, now we know, clip of an individual, young man, and we know his name now is Nick Sandman, and he goes to Covington Catholic Church, standing there with a Make America hat on in front of Nathan Phillips, who at the time was identified as a Vietnam vet. We're finding out maybe that isn't the case, a Native American beating a drum. And the implication is that he was confronting this adult, and he was smirking at him. But we've since then found out that if you look at some of the other videos or even hear his own testimony, it was just the opposite. And it's amazing to me how many people jumped in against him, even conservatives, even people in his own church. And it's a good example of in Proverbs 18 where it says one person's perspective may sound good until you hear the other one. And I just think that this is there's some wisdom there of saying, when you see something, even if you think you've seen it, you may not have seen all of it. And sometimes it's really, I think, responsible to withhold judgment. We learned that this week, didn't we?
Especially a video that's making its way around the internet. I mean, we have so many capabilities of editing and changing the whole message, which is what happened here. And it's a lesson to the media. Slow down. Ask questions before you report. Although, it's funny because, some media outlets have now got the full story, and so they're saying they were wrong. But the way most of them are doing it, there's a few people who have really apologized to the young man for misreporting and basically assuming that if you go to a private school, especially a Christian or Catholic school, you're probably rich, you're white, you probably hate minorities and you're racist. And so they just assume that narrative was true and that this young man was the one who was at fault and disrespecting this Native American, which was quite the opposite. He and his friends were at the March for Life, and they were there waiting for a ride to pick them up in front of the Lincoln Memorial. And there was these Black Hebrew sort of demonstrators who were actually insulting them.
Yes.
And then this Native American came in and beat the drums in the face of Nick Sandman. And he was just standing there and smiling, but the media picked that up as smirking.
Yes.
Smiling or smirking.
Yeah.
And they just assumed it was smirking. So they assumed assumed a lot of lies. And they've been proven wrong now when people started to look at the entire raw video that was actually tracked down.
Dr. Merrill Matthews, if nothing else, withhold judgment, right? That's Proverbs 18, verse 17,
That is absolutely right, because there's oftentimes another side of the story. I keep thinking my disdain for the mainstream media can't get any worse. And then this comes out and it gets worse, because it's very clear. If you were a reporter and you saw this, if you're a reporter, you would want to find out what led to this. Did the boys go and surround this guy? And they just made a bunch of assumptions.
Oh, sure did.
Of which they didn't. They had no sense of it. And people who've been I've been in the public policy world for 25, 30 years now. And one of the things we've always known is the mainstream media is largely lazy.
Yes. And even more so because they'll just pull it off social media.
That's right. And
in the old days, they used to call you and me up and get our opinion. Now they just pull it off social media.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And you'd know that you could tell by when they were asking you questions, they were going to write this story against what you did, but they felt some kind of ethical obligation to at least ask you. And then they'd put one quote in there at the end of the story while they were trying to make their case for whatever it is they wanted to do. But it has just gotten so bizarre that they don't even go and check these things. It's just, no wonder social media and alternative media, things like Point of View, have gained so much, because there's at least the people we try to do our background and checks on these things.
Yeah. I think most of our listeners know who Representative Dan Crenshaw is. Mm-hmm. He represents now the 2nd congressional district. 1st congressional district is Louis Gohmert. 2nd congressional district is Dan Crenshaw. By the way, I might, if I can do a quick plug, he also will be the speaker at the Lincoln Day dinner for the Collin County Republicans. So you get a chance to meet him face to face if you come up with us to that. But the other day he put out a tweet and he said, look at all this. First of all, no coverage of the right to life or the March for Life. Number 2, inaccurate about the BuzzFeed story, which we haven't really talked about today, but we have previously. Then the attack on Karen Pence and, of course, the Covington boys. And he said, okay, first of all, they were wrong 4 times in a row, and 3 of those were anti-Christian as well. And I thought that was a striking tweet that all within, I think he figured out about 72 hours, you have 4 false stories, and 3 of the false stories were anti-Christian.
Yeah, and a couple of things we mentioned last week was, assuming that Karen Pence is just some evil person for working at a Christian school, and also Kamala Harris, who's now a presidential candidate,
yes,
on the Judiciary Committee, really her inquisition
Yes.
of a nominee because they're in the Knights of Columbus, an extremist, pro-life organization. So the media bias against Christianity and religion is, definitely gotten put on display this week. But I thought it was also telling to hear the View ladies talk about these Covington students, because when they realized this was a mistake, and Whoopi Goldberg asked, "Why do we keep making the same mistake?" Joy Behar answered, "We're desperate to get Trump out of office."
Yes.
They are so desperate that they are,
said.
quote
Yes.
unquote, deranged, and they are not doing their job as media. They're not going after the truth. They're going after a narrative. They want to find things that are going to play into their narrative. And, right now, if you're a private school kid, I mean, Brett Kavanaugh, private school, rich kid, evil. And now this young man, Nick Sandman, is in that. And, this is not, this is damaging. The media will get, they'll get by with this. But these young men, somebody pointed out, now if they're looking for a job someday and somebody Googles this and they don't really look into it, they don't remember the story, they're going to think that there's going to be like a little black check mark on their record.
But we need to correct this notion. Just because your kids go to private school doesn't mean you're rich.
Right.
Both of our daughters went to a private Baptist school because when they first started, first, second, third grade, they were then accepted in the Talented Gifted program, and so we moved them in there because that was going to be a good education. But we had to scrape up money to get them into a private Baptist school that wasn't expensive.
Yes. And back to Penna's comment, we were supposed to have David French on yesterday, but we didn't. He's going to come on next week. But his piece was first Kavanaugh, then Covington. Kavanaugh was, at the end, a lot of people saying, that could be me, or that could be my husband, that could be my brother. Now, when they see the Covington kids, they say, that could be my son, that could be my nephew. I mean, there's a sense in which there is a connection between that. So I think we need to bring Kelly Shackelford in here and try to see if we can solve some of these problems here, this anti-Christian bias, and talk about religious liberty, and answer the question, the most asked question I get, having to do with Kelly Shackelford. Where are we with the Coach Kennedy case? So we'll talk about that as well. Let's take a break. We have a lot more to cover, and we will do so. As a matter of fact, we have some of these articles on the website. And, of course, don't forget Penna Dexter's commentary today, which connects up to, of course, the law out of New York. And if you haven't signed up for our commentary, there's just a red box there that says sign up. You receive my commentaries Monday through Friday in your inbox, and hers on Saturday, and we're playing hers here today. We have quite a bit still to cover, as you might imagine. So if you want to find out a little bit more about anything we're talking about today, it's all available at the website, pointofview.net. We have some take action ideas in terms of fighting against religious persecution, Penna Dexter's commentary, even a video for you to watch if you'd like to do so. So let's take a break. We'll add one more person to the round table right after these important messages.
The leader looked around the table, motioning to the older men. He said, "You're here to remind us how faithful God has been in the past. Now, you middle-aged guys, you keep us focused on what God is doing right now. Make sure we don't stop. And you younger guys, keep us looking forward. Imagine what God wants us to be doing in the years to come." There's a lot of wisdom there. We have to be thankful for the past, focused on the present, and mindful to plan for a great future. Many listeners have made bold moves to partner with Point of View Radio and accomplish great things for more than 45 years. But as we look around, we do see many positive things, and I think we can all admit there's a lot more to be done. It's time to think about your next bold move, what you can do to invest for our nation's future. Be thinking about that. If you have an answer now, don't wait. Make your next bold move now. Give online at pointofview.net or call 800-347-5151. It's our future. The time is now. Pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is our weekend edition, and we have a lot to cover today. Just as we came on the air, a possibility of a shutdown deal being reached, and so certainly we want to talk about that. An indictment of Roger Stone, who has, of course, been involved with the campaign of Donald Trump, so we'll get into that sometime briefly. The postponing of the State of the Union address, as well as I know we want to hear from Penna Dexter on the new abortion law out of the state of New York. Kelly Shackelford, I certainly want to hear from him about this possible rule change in the Senate, what that's going to mean for a number of issues. And, of course, answering the question everybody is always asking me whenever we get talking about religious liberty, what happened with that Coach Kennedy case? And Dr. Merrill Matthews in studio as well. We're going to be talking about whether or not democratic socialist ideas are a loser, and energy policy, and a variety of others. And somewhere along the line, we might be able to fit in some comments about the Covington kids and the March for Life and some of the hullabaloo about that. So, Penna Dexter, it's just going to be really difficult to see how much we get in the next 2 hours. But what do we know? It seems to me as if there's at least a possible break in the shutdown, right?
Right. And it hasn't been formally announced, but you've got people telling reporters, people out of the administration, that the deal, and of course it's the 35th day of the shutdown, that the government would open back up for 3 weeks, leaving the wall unfunded, and trying to negotiate a deal for those 3 weeks. And then, really the person who wants to deal with this problem inside me, wants them to break ground and get it going, and just to be strong. And so there is this possibility of the president going ahead and finding a way to build the wall outside of Congress approving it. I mean, I still think that may be part of what Trump is thinking as he negotiates this. But right now, that's what we're hearing, but we haven't heard an announcement about it yet. One of the things that does do is, because a lot of the media now is reporting back pay, people really struggling, air traffic control, the airports, all these issues that, they're picking out the issues, of course, that are the most egregious. And so that would take care of that. I mean, everybody could get their back pay, and then they would have the threat, again, of another government shutdown held over them. If it were any other president, I would not buy this at all, that threat would be real. I don't think that any other president would go through the pain again of shutting the government down so quickly. I think Trump might, if Congress doesn't make a deal, but we will see. That's the news, and we'll keep watching this throughout the show to make sure we've got the latest on that.
And there was a good article, Rick, came out just the other day, this White House correspondent, that actually listed the 6 different proposals, if you're keeping count, that were made by President Donald Trump, which almost in every case, Dr. Merrill Matthews, were rejected, in some cases before he even announced what they were. Like one on Saturday, Nancy Pelosi comes on before he makes the announcement, already rejects them. That doesn't sound like compromise to me.
Well, there's 2 facts of life. Taxes and Republicans get blamed for government shutdowns. Except for the Schumer shutdown that they actually did get the blame for. But yes, apparently Trump may be coming coming up with something that they can get this done. Both sides, some Republicans and some Democrats, were getting very nervous about what was going on here and feeling like we need to get this addressed somehow. Nancy Pelosi apparently was not moving at all on this. On the other hand, Ann Coulter had a piece out in which she claims anything other than just starting to address this thing and build the wall now would lose. If President Trump didn't do that, he was going to lose the 2020 election. He would lose his base. I think Ann does a lot of strong opinions. This was a really strong opinion. I'm not sure she's right on that, but she might be.
But I posted there for people to read for themselves. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But anyway, they may be making a little bit of progress now, and there may be more things going on behind the scenes in which Nancy Pelosi says, yes, we'll let you have a vote on this, but I can't publicly say that because somebody's got to blink, Mr. President. It's got to be you.
Yeah. So again, Dr. Merrill Matthews, of course, with IPI.org. We'll talk more about some of those resources. Plus, we've posted 2 of your articles, but also flying in today, Kelly Shackelford's been in California. And Kelly, this, again, of course, he's with First Liberty, is just another example of the conflict that surfaces when we don't have regular order. We have these continuing resolutions, and as a result, now we're just postponing the inevitable for another couple of weeks, aren't we?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the problem with this is you just didn't see any end to it. And I've said before, the president kind of has to do this. He made this promise. The people elected him on building the border wall or the fencing or whatever you want to call it. And it's a small amount of money of the budget. But the Democrats have decided they don't want to give him that. And as long as the polling is, they're blaming everybody, but they're blaming Trump more than the Democrats. And as long as that is in place, it's obvious that the Democrats have just decided they're just not going to even try to work for a deal. And so, we just sit in this situation. So, I mean, I wish the American people were smart enough to all of a sudden just poll that they blame the Democrats. It'd be amazing how all of a sudden we would have, people talking and trying to figure it out, because Trump has been trying to figure out, he's got his issues, but on this, he was looking for a deal, and the Democrats refused to even have that discussion. And so this 3 weeks, I guess the idea is that we'll give them a chance to at least sit down and see if they could work a deal. But I think the problem is, I just think the Democrats, it's just a political, it's not, they showed they don't really care about DACA. They're showing they don't care about these things, because when they were offered them, they said no, the politics are more important to them. If they can get the PR and have people blame Trump, that's more important to them than the substantive issues and sitting down and trying to figure out what things they want and what they want to deal.
And I think Kelly's point was exactly right. The minute Democrats are perceived as receiving the blame for this, they would be up trying to find a deal. They felt Trump was getting the blame for it, so they were happy to continue.
And that's kind of where the polls are at the moment. It's kind of interesting. One of the things that Jonah Goldberg pointed out is they blame the president. They sometimes blame the Democrats, but very low on the list, only like 3% blame the Republicans. And if you think about this, this happened because Republicans could have done this when they had control of both the House and the Senate. But they, so far, the Republicans, at least in the House and the Senate, have gotten off almost scot-free.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if Trump has a strategy now to shift the blame. I mean, I do think the DACA issue is one kind of issue that's ripe because it's an emotional issue, and Trump did offer something for those kids who'd come to the country. And, his base is not even for that, but he offered that. So maybe he can play with that during this next 3 weeks. I don't know.
That was one of those in which he said, I'll trade you $5.7 billion for a barrier, for $800 million in humanitarian aid, temporary extensions of DACA, which, again, are for the Deferred Action on Childhood individuals, as well as TPA, which are temporary protected status. And you would have thought that's a deal that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi would have gone for. But every offer other than pay the government workers, then maybe we'll talk, has been eliminated. So that may be where we find ourselves. No State of the Union address. That's the first article there. I was surprised that he didn't say I was going to try to find another venue, but sometime we'll have a State of the Union address. And that means that at least Dr. Merrill Matthews and I will have a busy night when that happens.
We will
right?
that night.
Let's take a break. We have a lot more to cover. We will do so right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Earlier this month, I turned on the Tucker Carlson television program and heard him deliver a monologue that lasted nearly 15 minutes. It became the monologue heard around the conservative world, and nearly every commentator has had negative things to say about his comments. But I want to do just the opposite. Sure, there were things that he said that were incorrect or overstated, but I want to affirm many of the things he said that were right on target and lost in some of the critical comments about his commentary. A few minutes after criticizing Utah Senator Mitt Romney, he wonders why we have so many deaths of despair in a country where the economy is booming and many people are doing well financially. He says bluntly, anyone who thinks the health of a nation can be summed up in GDP is an idiot. The real goal for America, he believes, should not be more prosperity. The goal should be happiness. The key ingredients might be such things as dignity, self-control, independence, and deep relationships with other people. Many of his critics say Carlson gets off track by blaming the elites and promoting a type of victimhood populism. While that may be true, don't miss his accurate diagnosis. If more material goods would make us happy, then Americans should be some of the happiest people on the planet. They should be the happiest people in the history of the world. The median family income for Americans is the highest ever, even when adjusted for inflation. Yet we're lonely and depressed. Drug overdose deaths are at an all-time high, and these pathologies are not only in urban America, but also in rural America. Politics and government policies aren't going to change this dysfunction. These are cultural and spiritual problems. Tucker Carlson's diagnosis is generally accurate, and we Christians know there's only one answer: the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From SkyPass Entertainment, The Least of These, The Graham Staines Story. The Least of These, rated PG-13, in theaters February 1st. TheLeastOfThese.movie.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Hey, once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. It is our weekend edition. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, Buddy Matthews. Let me just mention that, Penna, you remember sometimes when we had the newsroom, they'd come running in and say, well, the president just said, well, I just got in my ears from Andrew, our engineer, that the president just now announced that a deal has been reached. So, again, we'll see how that plays out over the next couple hours and find out exactly what that deal is. But it looks to me like it is just kind of a clean CR, if you will, and kind of a last-minute attempt to at least pay those individuals. And all of us know individuals. I've shared before that the chairman of my deacon board is actually somebody who works in air traffic control. Now, he is not one of those air traffic controllers right now. He's a kind of a manager, so he doesn't even go to work. But some of these other guys are really trying to figure out which planes are going, where they are in the sky, not getting paid. Of course, TSA, I got a person at another place I know is an FBI agent, and they're not getting paid. So obviously that means that they will get their back pay. And the government, at least that part of the government, will be open for another more 3 weeks. But who knows what happens after that, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit puzzling to me because I know there were some votes to pay everybody that that were not passed. And it was Democrats that really voted against that. There weren't, you didn't get the support. So, I'm kind of surprised in a sense that this has happened, that it's being reopened, and I'm just having to be hopeful that there would be some lines in the sand drawn during the 3 weeks. I don't know.
And if they don't want to meet with the president, which they haven't done quite often, Dr. Merrill Matthews and I were just talking about the fact, he gave this announcement on Saturday, which I don't think is the best time to do so, but I think the president said, I will make this announcement, this overture, on Saturday, knowing full well that they'll probably reject it, and then the Democrats will be on the talking head shows on Sunday and try to explain why you rejected something that in a previous year you would have accepted without even a thought. And I think that's exactly maybe some of the strategy there.
And their mantra was this would be a permanent wall but a temporary fix on DACA. So they had their talking points. They all stuck with that, and it rang. It's a good talking point because you juxtapose those. But they all stuck with it, and it seemed to mean that they just weren't going to go anywhere.
But it's funny because they can't really say why a wall is so bad. They can't really give a good reason why a wall is bad.
We have the tapes of them supporting walls in times past.
Yeah, to say they won't work, they are against it in some cases because they know they will work, obviously. And the cost thing, Kelly and I have had a lot of fun talking about how it's a fraction of 1% or a rounding error for $5.7 billion. So you can't use that argument, or that they're immoral, and you can't use that argument. So after a while, you sort of run out of arguments. And so we've had some fun with those as well.
Well, and the congressman from Texas that you mentioned a minute ago had a piece in the Wall Street Journal which said, well, the opponents of the wall say they'll just go around it. Well, that's the point. Is they go around it, and that forces them into an area where we can capture them. I mean, it was right. It was a very interesting comment he had there.
I love Representative Dan Crenshaw, and again, if I can do a quick promo, he's going to be speaking to the Collin County Republican Lincoln Day dinner, and every time I turn around, I mean, he is showing up. I mean, he's. First of all, you got in the first district in the state of Texas, Louis Gohmert. I think everybody around the country knows who he is. Then the second congressional district, you have Dan Crenshaw, and I think everybody's getting to know who he is.
Saturday Night Live, too, I think.
Yeah, everybody knew him as the guy that Pete Davidson made fun of, on Saturday Night Live, but I think everybody's getting to know him as a lot more than just the guy with the eye patch, and he's really taken some strong stands, so that is really good. Kelly, you've been, of course, watching this all week as well. Love to get your comments about where we go from here, because it still seems to me the president might have a hand in saying, okay, I'll open it for 3 weeks, but if you aren't going to show any good faith effort, we're going to close it down again.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to see anything different. I hope so. I mean, I hope there's a discussion and that they can say, hey, let's each get something we want that we think is good, and we can move on. But at least in the last weeks, again, the Democrats haven't even been willing to sit down and have those discussions because they thought the PR was, working their way.
Right.
And I do think what Nancy Pelosi did on the State of the Union was, obviously we don't have very many real statesmen anymore in this country, it doesn't seem like. But what she did, I thought, was really damaging to the country. I mean, the whole point of the State of the Union and having everybody come together is that it's a good thing to have everybody come together, and for the president to give, the president's idea of what direction, the president is planning to go for the next year, and to give the State of the Union. Well, you don't cancel the State of the Union because things are difficult. That's about as un-American as anything I can think of. And so I think what she did was really bad, and I think it was something that will not be looked on in history as a good Speaker of the House. That's a bad Speaker of the House. That's somebody who is putting politics above the country, and instead of bringing everybody together, if there are disagreements, at least everybody is together. It's like
same room.
Yeah, if we're a family, we still come together. And so I thought that was bad. I thought the president was probably wise to say, well, if she's not going to do that, because you could have one in the Senate, right? But then you would have half the people not there. And again, I think that it goes against the whole, he could give one from the Oval Office. Again, I think the whole point is for all to come together. For half of them not to clap at part of the speech and all that. But I think we really miss something when we damage our country when we began to move away from the traditions, from the things that are in the Constitution that we've always done, where we do always come together, no matter how upset people are with one another.
I think the thing that demonstrates how childish she's been about this is that because it's the speaker that issues the invitation to the president to come speak.
That is true.
And she did. After this shutdown started is when she issued the invitation. Then she came back and said, maybe it's not a good idea because we can't protect you. And then that was proven to be a false statement. Right. Nobody said that they couldn't protect the president or protect the chamber. So now she's come back and rescinded the invitation completely. I think that, and this all happened after the shutdown started. So it does show, I think, just a lack of statesmanshipness.
Yeah.
And just childishness and divisiveness, which is something I think it may not play well over the long term. Mm-hmm. Right now, it's not necessarily.
And of course, Trump came back by canceling her trip,
right.
and
yeah.
I mean, he participated
back
in this.
and forth. Yeah.
But I think she started it, and I think what I'm saying is it's one thing to be politically kind of juvenile, which both Nancy Pelosi and Trump have been, but I think to play with the State of the Union is a different thing. I think it's something important for our country. It's in the Constitution, and it is one of those things where we bring everybody together. And I think to use that as a political tool is really unseemly and I think damaging to the country.
If indeed they do have a State of the Union address before the next shutdown, assuming there is one, you have to wonder if that doesn't play into Donald Trump's hand. Because just think about what he can say, why we need the wall. Venezuela. Anybody notice what's going on in Venezuela?
Wow.
The Brookings Institute said that could result in 8 million refugees out of that country. Now, not all of them end up in the United States, but they're all over the place.
3 million have already fled.
Yes, you got El Salvador, you've got Nicaragua, which is a disaster right now. And even though I love our Mexican people, the Mexican government's got its own problems right now. And just the other day in testimony, at least one individual, we don't know if it's true, but it was testified that $100 million was given to a previous president of the Mexican government by a drug lord that we've all been. So you see another caravan coming and all that. And then to make and marshal all those facts, because I do believe a lot of people will be watching the next State of the Union address, don't you think?
No,
I mean,
absolutely.
that almost looks like a cage fight. People are going to be tuning in. They'd hear maybe for the first time some of the arguments that I think are pretty compelling.
Well, if Nancy Pelosi won't allow a State of the Union address during this 3 weeks when the government workers are back to work, that, again, I think that could be a real demonstration of her nastiness. And perhaps that's in Trump's thinking in agreeing to this.
Well, we will see. Well, we have a lot. In fact, we got a whole series of phone calls here, so we will get to those. Of course, one of those on the issue of the New York abortion law, and I want to hear Penna's comments on that, and that's our third article. And then we also want to talk about some Senate change rules. And since Kelly Shackelford is here, we come back, we'll talk about what did the Supreme Court finally decide about the case involving Coach Kennedy, because that's a question people have been asking for some time. And if you find yourself wanting to read a little bit more on some of these issues, we have, I think, 6 different articles that you can read. 2 by Dr. Merrill Matthews, one that Penna has put forward that was written on the Federalist, one by Kelly and a couple of others, including some of the conversation we've had here today. So a lot of it available at the website, pointofview.net. Let's take a break. And if you want to be one of those individuals that'll have to wait in line, since we already have a couple of calls, 1-800-351-1212. We'll come back, get into the conversation, and take some phone calls right after this.
From Sky Pass Entertainment comes The Least of These, the Graham Stain story. When speculation mounts that a local missionary is converting locals to Christianity in India, a journalist must choose between his own ambition and the truth.
We can't make any mistakes. They have this law for a reason.
I know. We must pray.
Based on the true story. The Least of These, the Graham Stain story. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. In theaters February 1st. More information is available at theleastofthese.movie.
Jesus said you could find a person's heart by where they invest their money. We at Point of View could not be more thankful that so many demonstrate a love for truth and for this nation by investing in our common mission. Of course, the reality is our team, our truth team, is a small percentage of those who listen. And right now, as they say in sports, we could use a deeper bench. For those who have given, thank you. And if you haven't made that step yet, Take one now. Go to pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Show your heart for our future. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, and again, we have a number of phone calls, but if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to those in just a minute. Penna Dexter, Dr. Merrill Matthews, and Kelly Shackelford. And Kelly, I guess the question a lot of people have is what has happened on the case that you brought before the Supreme Court on Coach Kennedy?
Well, it's a little more complicated than the simple. Sort of bad news, good news. At first, the best thing would be, they would take your case, they would issue this incredible opinion, setting everything right in the world and making it well. They didn't, but they also didn't do what normally happens. There are about 8,000 requests, and for those who don't know, Coach Kennedy is the coach who we represent, who was fired because after the football game was over, he went to a knee when they go to the center of the field and all the coaches talk and everything. He went to a knee by himself for 15 to 20 seconds to say a silent thanks to God for the privilege of coaching the young men. He was fired for that. The Ninth Circuit said that coaches are not allowed to pray in public if anyone can see them. And it's just an incredible statement. Well,
thank you, Dr. Merrill Matthews, for laughing at that. I've laughed at it so many times, I've kind of gotten jaded now.
The Ninth Circuit out of San Francisco, of course, which is known for being overruled. But the problem is you get about 8,000 requests a year, and the court gets to take what it wants, and it takes about 80. So the odds are massively against them taking your case. And because they have so many, what you usually get is just cert denied.
That's it.
Okay? Yeah. It doesn't mean they agree or disagree with what was below. They just didn't take it. Well, something very, very unusual happened this week. They did do cert deny on Kennedy, but then four of the justices issued a statement that they put that almost never happens. And man, did they send a statement. The statement said, look, this is going to have to go back down because there's some factual issues we want nailed down by the trial court. But while it's on its way down, we want to say if the Ninth Circuit meant what it said, what was the word? We find that, quote, very troubling. Okay? It was really strong. And it pointed out that would mean, for instance, if a coach was seen by somebody in the public at a restaurant in their community and the coach, bowed their head over their meal, that they could be fired. That it's just unbelievable what they said. So they basically sent the signal of go back down to the trial court, nail these facts down, and it should be a victory for Coach Kennedy. And then they even followed that, though, with a reference to a free exercise case that has created lots of problems. For those who do, religious freedom work, there's a 30-year-old case, the Smith case, that everybody who really cares about religious freedom has said needs to be overturned. And, everybody thought maybe one day, but I mean, it's a huge problem, and it causes people to bring their cases like under the free speech clause because the free exercise clause is really not very useful because of this bad case. Mm-hmm. Well, really, towards the end of this statement, those four justices said not only were they concerned about what happened at the Ninth Circuit and sent it back, let's get this cleaned up and let's get a victory for Coach Kennedy, essentially. But then at the end they said, now maybe what reached us was a free speech claim, because we had a free speech claim and a free exercise claim. Well, the free speech claim went up first. The free exercise claim hasn't come yet. He said maybe that wasn't up here because of this case. Okay, so he mentions this case.
Because of the Smith case?
Yes. And he says he basically invited that to be revisited.
Oh, boy.
Okay, so...
And that's one where Scalia ruled, we think, incorrectly.
Right. And so that's a really significant thing that happened for religious freedom in a lot of ways. And I would add, people were wondering, well, what is Kavanaugh going to do? Kavanaugh was one of the four. Okay, to issue this very unusual statement, a strong statement for religious freedom and for the First Amendment. So... that's the long answer. The quick answer to Coach Kennedy is it's not over yet. He's going back down to the trial court. We are going to do everything in our power to win, because this is not only about Coach Kennedy, it's about every coach in the country. And so I would encourage people, if they're not following this, make sure you get you can go to you can either go to firstliberty.org, or you can just go to pointofview.net and you can click on our information there and go. But make sure you're following this. You can share this with other people. There needs to be prayer. This is an important case for the future of our country. But I thought that what happened was actually really, really positive in a number of ways. Seeing what Kavanaugh did, seeing what they did on free exercise, and even on the Coach Kennedy saying that they were very troubled with what they saw below, but trying to clean some facts up and then get this straightened out. So we'll see where it's still, the fight is still going. Coach Kennedy is entering overtime, or the second quarter or the third quarter or something, and we just need prayer and everybody to join with him.
And again, if you go to firstliberty.org, Penna, we got a pathway to victory. 4 Supreme Court justices provide hope for Coach Kennedy, and they can learn some more. And I think it's still a matter of prayer, and I don't think it's over yet.
It is a matter of prayer, and it's in a sense because here at Point of View we have been following this, and people are emotionally involved in the case now. I mean, I've heard Coach Kennedy speak, and so when I see this, it's a little bit anticlimactic for me now. So I think it's important for us now to explain to people that this is not a defeat. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of hope. And I think Kelly just did that. Now, we need to be able to do that, too, to folks that are asking us. And I think the best way is probably to send them to firstliberty.org.
Yeah, and they can follow the case.
pointofview.net and click through.
They can send a note to Coach Kennedy. I mean, there's a lot of things, but I really encourage people that at least they're in the information loop so they can pray and they can see the updates and they can know, because this is going to affect a lot of people across the country.
Dr. Merrill Matthews, you laughed, and I appreciate that, because after you hear it enough times, you get kind of jaded. But even the first time or first 10 times you hear this and go, really? If I see you praying, that would be unconstitutional? It's like you just roll your eyes at something like this.
And so let me ask Kelly, are there some openings on the Ninth Circuit that Trump is going to be able to fill?
There are. In fact, one of the things that people are really surprised about, I know we're going to talk about judges, is if you look at, and we did an article on this that's out there, we talked about all the circuits, the courts, federal courts of appeals, and how many of them are starting to move towards flipping, where they were Democrat appointee to now Republican. And the one that everybody thinks will never flip is the Ninth Circuit, because it's so liberal. Well, if the judges that are up right now get moved through, they'll just be like 3 seats away from flipping the Ninth Circuit. So, for instance, do I think that'll happen in the next 2 years? No. It's going to get really close. But if Trump, for instance, were elected again, I think the Ninth Circuit would flip.
Wow.
So when you look at what's happening with the judges, it's pretty major, not only what has happened, but what is now happening with 163 seats open right now. We're talking about really changing the courts in the future if the Senate starts moving these judges through, which they're expected to do.
So the Ninth Circuit is probably where the left will play a lot of hardball in order to block good judges from being confirmed there.
They would try, but they can't. They
succeeded. Didn't they succeed on one guy this last year?
Yeah.
Where they brought back his college
from
paper.
Stanford,
Yeah, but the only reason that worked was because, unfortunately, Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, and at the time it was a 51-49 Senate. Well, now it's 53-47.
So if you have a Tim Scott or some Republican that's going,
and Marco Rubio, I think, eventually went around with him too.
He joined him to be supportive.
So I'm just alerting our South Carolina listeners and our Florida listeners. If it weren't for those two, that individual would be on the court.
Ryan Bounds, excellent guy. I mean, it was really, I think, silly what happened, but. The point is, there are a number of those seats that they just announced even today. I think the hearing's on Monday. They're going to vote a number of these people back out of the Judiciary Committee. They're going to go towards the floor. We're going to start moving these people out of the Senate. And we'll talk a little bit later, I guess, about the change in the rules that will allow things to move more quickly. But the point is, it is a Senate that is more Republican than it was, and it's a stronger type of Republican, a stronger conservative type of Republican. So there's not a Jeff Flake anymore and some of those people. And instead it's like a Marsha Blackburn instead of a Coker and all these types of things. So you've got a stronger Senate and you've got more room on the judges. So I think that's the one thing the Senate can do. They're not going to pass a lot of stuff with the House, but they can move judges through. It's only the Senate, and it just takes a majority vote.
Let me just mention, if you're looking for some resources, first of all, the article we talked about, it's the 4th article. It's by Hugh Hewitt, who is, it's been a while since we've had him on the program because he's kind of busy with his own talk show. But this one about a possible Senate rule change. So we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Also, some of you have said before, how do I find out about those judges? Again, go to firstliberty.org, type resources, then judicial nominees, and you'll find the material right there. We're going to talk about abortion right after this.
Planned Parenthood's former president, Cecile Richards, downplayed abortion as her organization's core activity. She famously maintained that abortion only makes up 3% of Planned Parenthood's services, and that the organization is focused primarily on women's health. We expected Planned Parenthood's new president, Leanna Wen, a medical doctor, to continue in this mode, but she recently blasted media outlets Planned Parenthood has long depended on to underplay its abortion activity. She says they are misconstruing her vision for Planned Parenthood. Our core mission, she tweeted, is providing, protecting, and expanding access to abortion and reproductive health care. We will never back down from that fight. Why such honesty? Perhaps Dr. Wen now feels she's free from the need to insist, as her predecessor did, that women in certain areas of the country won't get necessary female health services unless Congress keeps taxpayer dollars flowing to Planned Parenthood. Those monies are probably safe for now, since Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she'll wield a pro-choice gavel. So Dr. Wen can drop the ruse. This theme of transparency is also taking hold in pro-abortion activism. A group called Shout Your Abortion seeks to portray abortion as a social good. Shout Your Abortion recently released a video with the title, Kids Meet Someone Who Has Had an Abortion. It's an episode of Kids Meet, a show put out for children by Cut.com. In it, Shout Your Abortion's co-founder, Amanda Bonow, attempts to convince several children that they should celebrate abortion with her. She tells them, abortions are part of God's plan. Uncomfortable, sort of like a yucky dental appointment. But afterwards, she felt, quote, grateful that I wasn't pregnant anymore. She asked one child, do we want people to have all those babies? When he suggests adoption as a solution, she tells him, adoption would make her feel like, quote, I am forced to create life. Such an evil effort to make abortion palatable to children. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
A couple of issues I might want to put on the table. First of all, you just heard us talking about Coach Kennedy. The last article we just posted a link there, so you can go to that last link, or of course you can go to First Liberty, either way, and that will tell you all the information about Coach Kennedy. There's also a great video called Reset the Game Clock, and a piece by Michael Berry, a video, and some other resources. So again, that is on the website right now. Penna Dexter's commentary today, interesting enough, is about Planned Parenthood and the new head of Planned Parenthood, who's really out there, is probably a nice way to say it. I can think of some other words that is really challenging this issue and the whole idea of shout your abortion. And something I would love to have you address, Penna, if you can, and it's the third article we've posted here about the decision on the 46th anniversary of Roe versus Wade, when the governor, Andrew Cuomo, decided to sign the Reproductive Health Act and then actually paint by light a number of things. The One World Trade Center, the Mario Cuomo Bridge, the Alfred E. Smith Building in pink light. Tell us a little bit more about the act, and then we have some people that have called in and want to talk about it.
First of all, in New York, it's not like it's not already a very pro-abortion state. 1/3 of all pregnancies end in abortion there. More black babies are aborted than born in New York. But it's become even easier because of this law that passed and was signed by Governor Andrew Cuomo, Catholic, by the way. And he has really been sanctioned by the Catholic Church for his stances. But it becomes easier to get third trimester abortions under this law. One of the ways it becomes easier is the idea of the mother's health. Before this law, if the mother's health was endangered, you could get a late-term abortion. Now it's they've changed the wording to if a mother's health can be harmed, which is a very, very broad health exception to abortion. The cutoff point for abortions is 24 weeks. That's 6 months. So it's really, truly third trimester abortions that are now going to be more frequent. It decriminalizes abortion. In other words, if you harm the baby by a crime to the mother, say you hurt the mother and the baby dies, that was a crime. It's decriminalized that, taken away that criminal penalty. If a baby survives an abortion, it used to be the baby had to be protected. Under this law, the baby does not have to be protected. I think one of the worst parts of the law is up to 24 weeks, again, 6 months, the abortion can be done by non-doctors. Certain nurse practitioners and others can do that abortion. And even beyond that, if the baby is considered unviable. So what it is making post-viability abortions more frequent, easier to get in the state of New York. And it's really a sad anti-life law. One storekeeper in New York, famously, we've been reading about him. He's closed his shop today just to say, for this one day, I don't want to pay taxes to New York. I'm so disgusted by this. Andrew Cuomo celebrating it. As you mentioned, Kerby, he's ordered the World Trade Center, I forget which tower number, but the new building down there. Mm-hmm. It's got kind of a pointed antenna or something that's very tall. If you look at the pictures, it looks, somebody mentioned, it looks almost like the needle you would use to to perform the abortion. It's pink now, celebrating. And there's a bridge in New York. There's a building in the Capitol in Albany. Those are all lit up in pink to celebrate. There's a video going around of the legislature raucous cheering for this. So it's just so sad. If you're a pro-lifer in New York, you've got to be grieving. But what they're really doing is they're preparing for the day when Roe versus Wade is overturned. New York will be ready to be a ultimately pro-abortion state. Now, there are other states that have trigger laws that say, all this pro-life legislation will come into effect. It won't be legal in our state. So you've got that. But this is the ultimate pro-abortion legislation, and it took place this week when we are actually mourning Roe versus Wade decision.
Well, let's take some phone calls. We'll go to Missouri first. Randy, I think you want to talk about the New York abortion law. What are your comments?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Well, Penna kind of took the air out of my sails.
Sorry.
So a lot of people have been commenting as to what was the real point of all this. I mean, outside of the late-term abortion clinics in New York that are already doing the procedure, outside of them being able to now maybe expand their publicity, a lot of people are struggling to find out, what was the point. And so I'd like to present a little bit of a hypothetical. I think that they're laying the legal foundation and groundwork for organ trafficking, and not just aborted babies, but encroachment of socialized medicine. If you look at what's taking place in the black market from China with their prison population targeting prisoners and selling their organs on the black market, as ghoulish as it sounds, I mean, these people kill babies for a living. So there you have it.
Wow.
Yes, and the more developed the organ, and the recent death of the of the baby, certainly makes those more valuable. So that makes a lot of sense.
And again, the argument, Randy, was that, well, there may be a time in which Roe versus Wade is overturned. I don't think that's happening anytime soon, but that was the justification for it. But again, the celebration part, I've mentioned this before. Marlon Maddox, who is the original host of this program, and we always owe a debt of gratitude. I remember one time he had somebody on who was older than most of us around the table, who was there when Roe versus Wade was passed. A lot of us were in college or younger, in maybe grade school or whatever. But he was saying, even when abortion was legalized, I didn't think it would be that frequent because most people would still hide their views. He said, I couldn't even imagine that somebody would be marching in the street for abortion. And that brings us to the other commentary, Penna, and that is your piece about Shout for Abortion or Shout About Abortion, that you go into the fact that there are videos where kids meet someone who's had an abortion and to shout out your abortion. And even the applause, if you've seen the YouTube video after this was passed, you would think that most people would say, this is the worst of all circumstances, but it's something we need occasionally. But instead, now it's really being celebrated as almost a sacrament or something. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there are two things in my piece, and that's why I didn't call it Shout Your Abortion. Shout Your Abortion is part of it, and that is there's this group called Shout Your Abortion now, and one of their co-founders made a video with kids, and they call it Kids Meet. I guess there's a Kids Meet series. Well, she's talking to kids about her abortion and about how abortion is it's bad. It's kind of like a bad dental appointment, but I'm glad I did it, and it could be God's will. And answering kids' questions. One kid brought up adoption. That would be a better answer. That's what this kid said, and she said no because that would force me to create life. Like she's creating the life. So it's so in your face, and it's interesting because the millennials now are more pro-life. I mean, this generation is. They've seen their brothers and sisters aborted. They could have been aborted legally. And so they're getting more vocal about it. And then the other part of getting sort of doubling down on abortion is Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood gets money from the federal government, and there's always an argument about whether those are used for abortions. And Cecile Richards, who was the president for 12 years, would say, no, the money, first of all, only 3% of our activity is abortion, which was totally misconstrued. And she would say that the money goes to help women with breast exams and pap smears and, well woman checkups and all of that. Well, the new president of Planned Parenthood has dropped the ruse, and she is saying, no, our primary mission is abortion and reproductive health. And she actually was reprimanding the media that was kind of going with the Cecile Richards message. So people are shouting about abortion now, and they're proud of it.
Well, again, Penna's commentary, Shout About Abortion. And if you haven't signed up to get the commentary, it'll even drop into your inbox tomorrow if you'd like to get it. Let's take a break. We have a lot more to cover. We'll do that right after this.
Question: do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about Medi-Share.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With Medi-Share, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with Medi-Share. And they actually like Medi-Share more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of Medi-Share.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less and they like it more. No wonder Medi-Share is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I've recently started listening to Point of View, And I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, it is Weekend Edition, and Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, Dr. Merrill Matthews in studio with us. We have a number of phone calls left over from last hour, so we'll take those first as we've talked about the New York abortion law. That's the third article here. We have some other material that we want to get to this hour. One that Kelly Shackelford suggested. It's, again, a Hugh Hewitt piece on a possible Senate rule change, and one article by Dr. Merrill Matthews, which talks about democratic socialism. This is kind of a point-counterpoint, and we've posted that. With the economy humming, the democratic socialism seems like a likely loser. So we'll get to those topics in just a minute. If you've just joined us, we do think that there is a deal now closing down the shutdown and opening up the government till February 15th for the quarter of the government that was shut down. So we'll see where that takes us in just a minute. But let's take a few phone calls left over. And in South Carolina, Denise, what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Yes, I just wanted to say that, as a nurse, after 24 weeks, if the mother's life is in danger, then every effort is made to save both the mother and the baby.
Yes.
So really, it's not abortion. It's really just murder after that point because, if it's a case where the mother's life is in danger, then they try to save the baby too. So, that argument that they use that, it's to save the mother's life, if the mother's life's in danger, then there's a chance for the baby too.
Remember
So
John Wilkie that used to be on the program with us, Penna? And I mean, the title of one of his books is, Why Can't We Save Both of Them?
Yeah, love them both.
Yeah, love them both. And so, again, just a powerful argument.
Yeah, this, Denise, you bring up an interesting point because they're making late-term abortion easier. And it seems to me that, yes, if the mother wanted the baby, then you would save the mother and the baby. But if the mother doesn't want the baby, it sounds like under New York law, you don't save the baby.
Amazing. Well, Denise, I appreciate that. And again, that's just a good illustration of that. Let's move to North Carolina for just a minute on the Good News Network. Steve, what would you like to add to our conversation?
How are y'all doing? This is my take on that situation up there, that some of the same folks who is cheering all this abortion up yonder and stuff, they're the same ones who are out there marching against inhumane treatment of animals. And if somebody was to go and kick a pregnant dog where she lost the babies, they'd want them strung up in court. So they are valuing a preborn child's life less than an animal, which makes them no difference than the ones who still think slavery's okay.
Well, again, we've heard the arguments before that there's more federal protection of a bald eagle egg than it is of an embryo, and there are more regulations in many states, Penna, for an animal vet clinic than for an abortion clinic, and that seems to be very much the case here with this New York law.
We've had a lot of trouble across the country getting these laws upheld that would require abortion clinics to be like an ambulatory surgical clinic and be able to, pass those same types of inspections and regulations. And so he does make a good point. It's pretty sad commentary, isn't it?
It certainly is. One more phone call here on the issue of abortion, then I want to get into this issue of a Senate rule change. So we'll head up to Indiana. Larry, what's your point of view?
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
My whole point of view on the comment that was made earlier about whoever it was that was, talking about shout your abortion, that group of people or those individuals. First, knowing that life begins at conception. Second, if they want to say shout your abortion, they should say shout your sin of murder, because that's what it is. Plain and simple, no matter when the abortion takes place. If it's elective, it's murder.
Yeah, that's why you didn't used to shout about your abortion or brag about it, because there at least were some people out there that believed that it was murder and might think worse of you, but this group doesn't seem to care.
And again, that just seems to show how everything has just changed. I mean, we talk about these values that are inverted. Kelly Shackelford, the other day, you reminded about maybe we want to start reading in the book of Romans 1, starting in verse 18.
That's right.
And that God gave them over. Or you want to read in Isaiah 5, for example, starting about 18 again, in terms of the good of that which was good is now evil, and that which evil is now good. But we have, either in the Old Testament or the New Testament, the fact that all these values have been inverted, haven't they?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now. I mean, I think everybody knows that. Everybody, certainly all believers know that. I mean, that people aren't even. We had crazy stuff this week of people saying, "Well, my daughter, I'm not going to." Now, notice she called her daughter, but she said, "My daughter, I'm going to let her decide whether she's a boy or a girl." And you're like, that's the dumbest thing I could ever imagine. Somebody said, number one, you said she, daughter. You already kind of nailed it right there with the chromosome. So, but I mean, I think most people looking at this and going, these people have lost their minds. I mean, they really have. I mean, and the only thing you can think of is, again, it's like read Romans 1:18 through the end.
God gave them over to a depraved mind, right?
Yeah, and they call evil good and good evil, and they even celebrate. I mean, that's part of it. They not only are boasting about things that are bad, but they encourage others to boast about. And that's exactly shout your abortion, right? I mean, that's exactly where we are with these things. And look, the key to all this, and I think it was very disturbing to see a lot of these things combining this week. The Covington kids, the attack on Karen Pence because she was going to teach at a Christian school, the attack on a judge because he was a member of the Knights of Columbus, and you just start adding these together. And you realize, there's a real attack on just the most basic religious freedom for people of faith and Christianity. And it's going to require those who believe to stand their ground and to speak out. If you let these things be said and you don't respond, then they gain ground. And so you have to speak against it when you see it. You have to stand up against it when you see it. And I think if we do, we will stop this. But it's they're really trying to turn everything upside down. And, if we're silent, they might succeed. Hopefully not.
And I would add that besides just an attack on basic religious freedom, in the transgender issue, it's an attack on basic science.
Yeah.
You either have two Y chromosomes or you're an XY. That's what you got. And I just find it interesting that liberals tend to say conservatives deny science. And yet, the most basic science, which isn't based on an econometric model or a climate model, is right there, and they're doing their best to deny it.
I think it might have been you, Kirby, that sent me a Twitter conversation. Maybe it was Kelly. A New York Times reporter is trying to get people to talk about their private school experience, their Catholic school or whatever. And there's going to be a New York Times. They've already done something blasting Karen Pence for teaching in a Christian school, but there's going to be something coming out from the New York Times about Christian education in schools. So be ready. And we ought to be ready with some arguments about this. And, we've watched a teacher strike out in California and, blasting people who want to make their own decisions about education. So I think there's going to be a move there, and we Christians are going to need to speak on it.
I'll read a few of the Twitter comments he's received, and it's a lot more positive than I think he expected. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Earlier this month, I turned on the Tucker Carlson television program and heard him deliver a monologue that lasted nearly 15 minutes. It became the monologue heard around the conservative world, and nearly every commentator has had negative things to say about his comments. But I want to do just the opposite. Sure, there were things that he said that were incorrect or overstated, but I want to affirm many of the things he said that were right on target and lost in some of the critical comments about his commentary. A few minutes after criticizing Utah Senator Mitt Romney, he wonders why we have so many deaths of despair in a country where the economy is booming and many people are doing well financially. He says bluntly, anyone who thinks the health of a nation can be summed up in GDP is an idiot. The real goal for America, he believes, should not be more prosperity. The goal should be happiness. The key ingredients might be such things as dignity, self-control, independence, and deep relationships with other people. Many of his critics say Carlson gets off track by blaming the elites and promoting a type of victimhood populism. While that may be true, don't miss his accurate diagnosis. If more material goods would make us happy, then Americans should be some of the happiest people on the planet. They should be the happiest people in the history of the world. The median family income for Americans is the highest ever, even when adjusted for inflation. Yet we're lonely and depressed. Drug overdose deaths are at an all-time high, and these pathologies are not only in urban America, but also in rural America. Politics and government policies aren't going to change this dysfunction. These are cultural and spiritual problems. Tucker Carlson's diagnosis is generally accurate, and we Christians know there's only one answer: the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Sky Pass Entertainment, The Least of These, The Graham Stain Story. The Least of These, rated PG-13, in theaters February 1st. TheLeastOfThese.movie.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
This is difficult. We have 3 segments left, and we've already just in the break talked about all the things we haven't talked about today. Roger Stone indicted, which we probably will not get to. I do want to get to the Senate rule change, as well as, of course, this very excellent article by Dr. Merrill Matthews on democratic socialism. But since we mentioned, Penna mentioned at least, New York Times, Dan Levin has been doing this and put out a Twitter post, and we saw that, and Kelly and I and all of us have been watching this. And so far, if you look at some of the Twitter post in response to him. Now, they were supposed to direct message him, but some of them don't know how to do that. So we've been able to see some of the messages he's been receiving. I'll just give a few. One from Lauren: my Christian education was a happy experience. My teachers were committed to the well-being of their students. Adriana said, I'm in my 30s, went to a Christian school, and deeply appreciative for the sacrifice my parents made to send me there. I got an excellent education, on and on and on. Joseph said, I attended a Catholic high school and extremely grateful for my experience. These just go on and on. Christy says, I tried to direct message. You didn't know how to do that. But my favorite thing was my experience in the Christian school. And so some of them finally said, I will be glad to report on these. Or are you just looking for the negative ones? Which at that point, I thought it was interesting. Dan Levin said, well, I write about American youth at the New York Times, and the hashtag is #expose Christian schools, which I didn't create. It went viral, and I'm writing about the response. So I want both positive messages as well, because that's about all he's been getting, which led to Marty saying, well, how about my horrible experiences in public schools, #expose public schools? So he didn't, I think, expect to get so many positive posts, but we will see what ends up in the New York Times, won't we, Penna?
Yeah, that's going to be quite interesting.
I thought it was kind of fun. Anyway, I just thought I'd show you a little behind the scenes, and we'll be watching for it and see what happens. But Kelly Shackelford, the other question I get most often, in addition to the question, of course, about Coach Kennedy, is, are we going to turn things around with the judges? And I was at a dinner last Friday, and that was a question that surfaced. And so a lot of people say it still seems like it's taking forever to get any of these judges on the court. And so that's why we've posted this piece by Hugh Hewitt, because there's a change afoot, isn't there?
Yeah, I hope. I mean, he's saying he thinks, and the senators are saying that they think they're about to do this, but it's kind of a no-brainer. What this rule is, it used to be that if a senator had a problem with somebody who, they're nominating to be confirmed to, a cabinet position or a judge or whatever, it might be that senator has some particular situation. Well, the idea is they could ask for 30 hours of debate where they would debate this. And I think it happened a total of, in the first 2 years of the last 3 or 4 administrations, I think maybe like 8 times. And I think, I forget what it was last I saw. It was over 120 or 130 times. What they were doing is the Democrats have decided that this is a way to just slow things down. And so they just object to everybody, every nominee of the president to be in the cabinet, to be in the courts, to be anywhere, even if they're going to vote for him. I mean, there's even been people that were Obama appointees that Trump went ahead and reappointed, and they did the 30 hours on them. So it's just a way to clog the system and to slow everything down. And really, it doesn't make sense that you're 2 years into the presidency and half of his positions in the government are not filled. That's really inexcusable, not to even mention the judges. So the Republicans are realizing, okay, a rule is a rule for a purpose, but when you abuse it like this and just try to gum up the system, it's really not serving its purpose. So they're evidently, as the Hugh Hewitt article says, very close to deciding we need to get rid of this so that we can have actual votes and move these people through. And if that happens, the judges are going to start moving a lot more quickly. And the other thing is the Senate really can't do much. It's not like House bills are going to come over and the Senate's going to love what Nancy Pelosi sent from the House. So they're probably not going to pass a whole lot of legislation. So really the one thing they can do, because they don't need the House, is they can confirm the president's nominees. And so that'll be a lot of their business over the next 2 years, and this will make it to where they can really move through. And in fact, they just have renominated 51 of the judges. I think there's 8 appellate, and all the rest are district court. And I think I saw that they're set for Tuesday, along with a vote for Bill Barr to be Attorney General. And so we're going to start seeing these people move through. Again, it's a new Senate, so they have to vote them back out of Judiciary Committee, which I think they're going to do very quickly, get those back on the floor who were on the floor at the end of last year, start moving them through. And, we're going to see very soon, hopefully, that they've changed this rule so that they can actually do what they're supposed to do.
Can they get rid of the 30-hour rule by majority vote?
Yes, they can.
And there's been a couple of other suggestions in there. If Mitch McConnell wants to move this through, then why not just continue with the 30 hours? So the Senate's open 24 hours a day, right. And you're welcome to come talk as long as you want to at 3 o'clock in the morning. Nobody's got to pay any attention, but that's one thing, and including weekends and other things. And secondly, the other option is the filibuster now has changed from the old Mr. Smith goes to Washington when Jimmy Stewart did it, and I think it was a 1974 law, if I remember right, that changed that. And I would be completely for going back. If you want to filibuster, if you feel that strongly, stand on the floor, give your speech as long as you can hold it. When you pass out, we'll go ahead and vote for it.
Yep.
But Wendy Davis did that in Texas at one point.
Yeah, Ted Cruz did it and then got in trouble yesterday for it. That's another whole story.
Rand Paul did it a while back, and it worked. So So I would like to see a real filibuster as opposed to the lazy man's filibuster, which they go, and I'm filibustering this thing, and now I'm going to go down to Puerto Rico and have a good time.
That's good stuff. So again, if you want to know a little bit more about where we are on some of the judges, you can go to firstliberty.org, click on resources, and then judicial nominees, and you can kind of see where that is going. And this is almost like watching some of these NFC and AFC playoff games. You can kind of see who, you can kind of see the brackets and all that. Yep. And some of these people up being considered right now. Because the other question I get is, okay, maybe we get these people on, but, I don't know about this Donald Trump. What about these nominees? You feel very good about these, don't you?
Oh, yeah. This is, I think, without a doubt, the most solid judicial choices ever. And there's no question, because it's just an empirical fact, it's the youngest ever. So what is happening is these are, for the first time, we kind of have removed a lot of the politics that usually is in this with the president. It's like, well, I helped you get elected, so my brother wants to be a judge, right? That's not what Donald Trump is doing. He made a promise to the base before the election of the types of judges. He even did the really unorthodox thing of putting a list out.
Put out the list
of who he was going to pick for the Supreme Court.
And he's kept to the list, at least for the Supreme Court.
And the judges have been of that, judicial philosophy of not being politicians. They're conservative, not in they're politically conservative. They're going to do their job as a judge. They're not going to say, well, hey, I really think I know what's right. No, they're going to follow what the law says. And so the judicial philosophy of this, originalism and textualism, this is the strongest we've ever had in these nominees. And I know it, and I wish you could just go down and explain, the point of view listeners, who these people are. Brilliant, very bright, very, committed to the Constitution, and to, most of them to the Bible, to their beliefs, and would never stray. You will never have to worry about these people. They're going to do the right thing. They're going to restrain themselves and follow the law. They're the type of humble, non-political, bright judges that everybody would want, on their cases. And we just haven't seen them. And look, all you have to do is look at Gorsuch, the first pick, right? We don't know enough with Kavanaugh with his decisions, but I've known Brett Kavanaugh a long time. I think people are going to, before the brouhaha in D.C. where they made it, everybody agreed that Brett Kavanaugh was one of the best judges in the country, and both sides of the aisle before that. Now, that's the quality of judges that are being picked. These are high-quality people, and again, I think we're changing the courts for, the next 20, 30, 40 years with what's happening right now. But it's a matter of getting these people through. There's been a little bit of a backlog, and so 85 got through in the first 2 years. There are 163 waiting to be filled for life.
There's some instances, like in the Kavanaugh nomination, where certain Democrats that are running for president who are on the Judiciary Committee love to find, something that's popular with their tribal supporters and bring that out and block and slow things down. And so, we may see some of that, but this 30-hour rule change may help.
No, it'll be huge. It's just it's the only thing that's really slowing things down now. And again, I think we shouldn't have it for any president, for their nominees. The Senate should vote on the nominees of the president, but you shouldn't deprive the president of having his nominees and picking his people.
We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
Question: do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about Medi-Share.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With Medi-Share, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with Medi-Share, and they actually like Medi-Share more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of Medi-Share.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less, and they like it more. No wonder Medi-Share is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, it is our weekend edition. If you'd like to join our conversation, we will get some of those phone calls when we can. 1-800-351-1212. Penna Dexter, Dr. Merrill Matthews, and Kelly Shackelford. Dr. Matthews, this one, I love this. Your father's Democrat Party might have had a good chance at capturing the White House in 2020. Your children's Democrat Party, and I think that's intended in both ways, needs some adult supervision, which it is today, is facing a tougher fight. Talk about that, because you hear people saying, well, the Republicans have taken a sharp turn to the right. I don't think there's really any difference in the last 20 years in terms of their party platform. When I hear some of these individuals talking about a Green New Deal, Medicare for all, and a variety of other topics, these weren't even, I don't think, in the party platform 2 years ago, were they?
No, and one of the ways you know this is when Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders used to, every session of Congress, he would introduce his Medicare for all legislation. When he would do that, in the past, Democratic senators would run for cover because they did not want to be associated with
They were
that.
all in the high grass.
They were all in the high grass. They had appointments. But in the last time he did this, he was surrounded, 17? I think, 17 or so around there.
Yeah, that's right.
With the A-list, well, let me say, with a list, let's say, of Democratic presidential candidate potentials all standing around there supporting him. So that just sort of gives you a little bit of an indication. And interestingly, it is, I mean, Democrats know this is happening as well. On the way over here today, I was listening to an NPR program where they had some various candidates in there, not candidates, but political advisors, Washington Post reporter, and the Washington Post reporter, politics reporter, said, "Yeah, we're seeing how much they've shifted to the left." He said, "I hear it every day from various Democratic strategists. They're not sure that the public is where they are right now because they can see how far to the left they're moving." But those are the ones who get the most media attention. And so from this standpoint, if you want to get the media highlighting what you're doing,
yes,
you've got to be lefter than thou in order to be able to do that.
Run to the left of Bernie Sanders. Is there any room over there? That's the first question you got to ask.
Where he looks like the reasonable alternative.
You know, when you talk about the Republican Party getting more extreme, the things that are labeled extreme are usually positions that are taken that didn't even have to be taken before. For instance, on marriage.
Yeah, good point.
You know, marriage was attacked. It wasn't like everybody was saying, well, homosexuals shouldn't get married. We weren't even thinking about that. But when the whole lobby came in and changed the institution of marriage, which has served cultures and societies for millennia, then people had to get moving and they had to take a position on that issue. And the same thing with the transgender issue. It's caused a multitude of issues to spring up now about bathrooms and facilities and all kinds of things. So you have to take a position. What about conscience rights? Taking away the right to not do an abortion, perhaps, or, you know, other things that religious people just find distasteful or find violates their faith. Well, they have to take a position on that. It's not that they've moved to the right. It's that they've had to react to moves to the left on moral issues.
Well, and again, with the Democratic Party, can you ever even imagine that you would have in a party platform the abolishing of ICE, the Immigration and Customs Immigration, or that you would have the Green New Deal, which the other day I just mentioned in passing. If you read the Green New Deal, and Dr. Matthews, you and I have, one very important part of that is to cut military spending by half.
Right.
That just takes everybody's breath away.
And it goes on, besides just envisioning us moving to a carbon-free, carbon-neutral society
within
in 10
a few
years.
Yeah,
right.
Oh, my goodness.
And adding carbon capture, recapture in there. It goes on. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sees this as a way to address transgender issues, racial divisions, income inequality, and she goes through and says, if once we do this, it will address all of these problems. She almost sees this as a utopia, which will address all problems that we have in the country with her Green New Deal.
I got to go to Kelly. He shakes his head, and I always love to hear Kelly's comments on some of these things. You actually were on the platform committee one time for the Republican Party, and you recognize how careful and crafted it is. I have no idea what the Democratic platform is going to look like this time.
Yeah, and I mean, we're really not clear yet, I think, nationally on how this will be taken. Now, in districts, people like Ocasio-Cortez have been elected. And you look, I mean, what she's saying, and anybody who understands even the most basic economics goes, she doesn't understand what she's talking about, right? And it's kind of embarrassing at times.
But remember, we're talking the media here.
That's
so.
right. That's right. So they're playing it, but that works, and she can get elected. But what about, and you got people running as socialists, right? And you had Bernie Sanders, who would call himself a socialist. But we've never had yet, at least, a national election where the Democratic representatives was, oh, yeah, I'm a socialist. How will that play in the country? I mean, I know how I hope it plays. I mean, I don't care who the person is, Republican, Democrat. If they say they're a socialist, they should say, okay, you're now disqualified. You will not be the president of the United States because you're now trying to usher in, an entirely new country that goes against everything this country was about, the freedoms that we're about. But centralized planning was not the plan of our founders. But we haven't seen that yet, so we don't know. We know that and the weird thing, the tough thing, if you're a Democrat, is if you want to win in your primary, it might be that you have to be this sort of really more extreme left-wing socialist. And then if you win, now have you just assured that you're going to lose nationally because the country's not going to accept that? We don't know. I mean, right. I hope that we have enough people who understand that this country is not about socialism. We're not trying to create the USSR here. But you wonder. I mean, there's a lot of bad teaching out there. Most of the polling, the good news is the Barna polling and everything shows that all these young people that say they like socialism and they don't like capitalism, when you go down to the next question or the next question after that, they're against all the things that socialism actually, does and requires. They just don't even understand what it is. So you hope that there's some truth underneath all that where they'd realize, no, I don't want the government controlling all this. I don't want centralized planning controlling my life. I don't want, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, they fall for the label. So we're going to have to wait and see. Plus, that requires people on the other side, like Republicans, to be good about talking about these issues.
Yeah, and talking about how the policies under this administration have actually helped the economy, not hurt it.
Yep.
Well, there have to be a lot of Democrats out there who are uncomfortable with the leftward shift here, and what we don't know is whether or not they will fall in line as things move forward. But my point is in part, if you're a moderate Democrat trying to get some attention, as Jim Webb was, the former Secretary of Defense, senator from Virginia, a Democrat running against Hillary Clinton. He wasn't even a blip on he would have been, I suspect, as an elected Democrat, a fairly good, reasonable president, but he couldn't even get a blip on the Democratic.
We're to the point now where Joe Biden is that, right? Yeah. I mean, Joe Biden is the moderate guy, right?
And the voice of common sense.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, again, will they come up with a Joe Biden and a socialist as their, as the vice presidential? I mean, do they come up with that approach? I don't know.
I don't know.
But, the party comes up with a platform, and if you go to the Democratic Socialist of America, that's a group, been around for a long time, and you look at their platform, it is identical to the Democratic platform of many of the candidates right now.
And again, as we pointed out, sometimes in the primaries, you have to run to the left if you're a Democrat, run to the right if you're Republican. But, okay, running to the left, 1972, George McGovern, how did that work out? Run to the left, 1984, Walter Mondale, how did that work out? And this time, who's going to run to the left of Elizabeth Warren? Who's going to run to the left of Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris? I don't know. Maybe each one of them is just going to try to out-left each other.
Maybe Beto O'Rourke.
He's on a kind of a listening tour, our beatnik tour right now, right? He's just kind of wandering around, checking things out.
Watching him get his teeth cleaned.
But the other issue, and Dr. Matthews, maybe we'll talk about this after the break, is first of all, money. You're splitting the money. There are going to be as many candidates, if not more, in the Democratic side this time than were last time. You had essentially 17 Republican candidates. You had the adults table and the kids table. This time I guess it's all kids table. I don't know what it is, but you're going to have your first debate in June in the Democratic Party, and they're doing that because they want to try to weed some things out.
But if you're Tom Steyer or whoever it might be trying to come up with who you're going to fund, you're going to have to split it a couple of different ways.
They do, but they have a lot. Several billionaires in the Democratic Party have
George
a lot of money.
Soros, all that money,
Yeah.
I don't know. It'll be interesting. And the other part I want to get to after the break is, of course, you've also pointed out that we've only had 5 times in 30 presidential elections in which the incumbent president has lost. And those are pretty extraordinary circumstances. So let's talk about that when we come back, right after these important messages.
Planned Parenthood's former president, Cecile Richards, downplayed abortion as her organization's core activity. She famously maintained that abortion only makes up 3% of Planned Parenthood's services, and that the organization is focused primarily on women's health. We expected Planned Parenthood's new president, Leanna Wen, a medical doctor, to continue in this mode, but she recently blasted media outlets Planned Parenthood has long depended on to underplay its abortion activity. She says they are misconstruing her vision for Planned Parenthood. Our core mission, she tweeted, is providing, protecting, and expanding access to abortion and reproductive health care. We will never back down from that fight. Why such honesty? Perhaps Dr. Wen now feels she's free from the need to insist, as her predecessor did, that women in certain areas of the country won't get necessary female health services unless Congress keeps taxpayer dollars flowing to Planned Parenthood. Those monies are probably safe for now, since Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she'll wield a pro-choice gavel. So Dr. Wen can drop the ruse. This theme of transparency is also taking hold in pro-abortion activism. A group called Shout Your Abortion seeks to portray abortion as a social good. Shout Your Abortion recently released a video with the title, Kids Meet Someone Who Has Had an Abortion. It's an episode of Kids Meet, a show put out for children by Cut.com. In it, Shout Your Abortion's co-founder, Amanda Bonow, attempts to convince several children that they should celebrate abortion with her. She tells them, abortions are part of God's plan. Uncomfortable, sort of like a yucky dental appointment. But afterwards, she felt, quote, grateful that I wasn't pregnant anymore. She asked one child, do we want people to have all those babies? When he suggests adoption as a solution, she tells him, adoption would make her feel like, quote, I am forced to create life. Such an evil effort to make abortion palatable to children. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and I will try to get some phone calls if I can. Dr. Merrill Matthews with us, of course, Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. And one of the points you make, Dr. Matthews, is there have been a few times in which incumbent presidents have been defeated. Herbert Hoover, Great Depression. That's easy to figure out. Jimmy Carter, sky-high inflation, interest rates, Iranian hostage issue. George Herbert Walker Bush, no new taxes. Ross Perot siphons off 19% of the vote. But you have to say right now, whether you like President Trump or not, we have a pretty booming economy. Yeah, eventually maybe we'll have a bear market, but right now we had a pretty good market. We have the median family income higher than it's ever been when adjusted for inflation, low unemployment. Now, you might have some elected officials and maybe even some voters say, yeah, but what have you done for me lately? But right now,
it does seem to me running on a very, very leftist agenda against a president who has been able to get the economy working.
That's the problem the Democrats face. If the economy manages to stay strong, we may, as you mentioned, we may hit a recession here sometime, or at least a slowdown. I suspect that would be short if we do. And Trump is well aware of this. He sees the stock market as a proxy upon how well he's doing in the economy. And so he wants to make sure the stock market's doing well and that companies are doing well. In fact, one of the reasons he's pushing to try to get the China trade deal actually finalized is because he feels like the stock market will start going up when that happens. So if the economy is doing well, it is very, very difficult to overcome an incumbent president regardless of the other issues out there.
This is such a strange time, though. I mean,
that's right.
We would never. I mean, the I hate Trump faction in the media and otherwise is so bizarre that I mean, we've forgotten. I think because I'm just reminding myself. Every other president in the past, every week, every 2 weeks, we'd be talking about, well, how's the economy doing? This would be part of our discussion here, right? You almost never get to talk about that because it's like the new Russia conspiracy, or now it's let's send 19 vehicles full of law enforcement to pick up Roger Stone. I'm sorry, I mean the guy could. I mean it would probably take a half person to pick up Roger Stone. Okay, 19 vehicles rushing into his house at 6 a.m. in the morning. It's just bizarre. It's like the focus is all on stuff that really has nothing to do with the American people's lives. When in the past, it's always been the media, I think, would think, well, what would people care about? Is their household income up? Is unemployment down? Is the GDP up? Do people feel better about the future? And it's so crowded out that we talk about the most, I think, inane things with the Russia conspiracy and the Mueller investigation and all these things that I don't know. I mean, I hope Meryl's right that people will look at, well, how am I doing? Yeah, I do have more money in my pocket, and yeah, there is more freedom. There's less regulations, and yet, maybe they'll look at those things, but they never get talked about in this current media.
I think where we are is that the greatest asset Donald Trump has going into the election is how far left the Democrats are moving. Mm-hmm. So that I think a lot of voters, independents and moderates out there, will say Trump's a little quirky, but the Democrats are nuts. And ultimately sort of make a decision for Donald Trump. I think that's probably going to happen. But with things changing every day and us still having 2 years, who knows what will be the issues now?
But again, you remind us, Gallup poll, 35% of Americans describe themselves as conservative. Mm-hmm. Another 35% describe themselves as moderate. Only 26% describe themselves as liberal, and not as liberal as some of the proposals.
If you go ultra-liberal, it would be down to what, 10, 5%?
Single digits.
New York and
you're
California.
Going to win with that? I mean, again, do the names Walter Mondale and George McGovern mean anything to you? For those of you that are students of history,
think Trump hatred is what's going to cause them to win,
Right,
not
I think that's
necessarily
right.
liberal ideas.
Yeah.
And so with the they're his associates like Roger Stone today, who didn't do anything with regard to Russian conspiracy, which is what the Mueller investigation is supposed to be about. All these ancillary issues with Roger Stone, everything that they're trying to get him on, came up because he was shown to lie.
Yes.
After
I don't like
after
any
Trump
of that. The
was
idea
elected.
the FBI comes and asks you a bunch of questions, and that's the crime that you
right.
didn't, because so they ask you the same question 20 different ways, and they say, well, it's not really consistent between this one and this one, and now, let's see if we can put the squeeze to him to give us other information. I mean, that's kind of seems what's happening in all these. None of these people are being charged with supposedly what the investigation is about. And I'm real uncomfortable with this. I don't think anybody wants the government sicked on them in this way because they happen to know somebody.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's what they call a process crime.
Right.
I really have a hard time with how this is being used and what's being done and the overkill because, they're really after something evidently that they can't find anything
But
on.
the sad part about it is the media leads with that.
Sure.
Rather than with good news about the economy or
not
something
only
else.
that, the other thing that's really disturbing is that CNN was, evidently
they must have been
tipped off by the FBI so that they could film 19, vehicles coming to.
They had to have known. Yeah.
That's, the explanation CNN gives is really not a very good one. Well, there was something going on in the grand jury. Oh, you mean the thing that it's a crime for the grand jury to talk about what they're doing? That's your explanation?
And your point with the Mueller investigation is they may stretch the charges in order to arrest him and then say, now that we've got you, if you want us to be kind to you, you need to give us more dirt on things and even maybe go over the edge a little bit in what you're saying will happen.
A la Michael Cohen, right? I mean, that's exactly. So it's just really bizarre. And plus, we're forgetting a lot that we really should think about whether we want this to happen to every president. Right. Because that's the danger of this. You lose the election, you get the FBI to invest. Well, we don't want to politicize this, so we'll appoint a special prosecutor. And then you spend the next 2 years with them seeing if they can find anything on the president who just got elected. This is not a good system. What's happening here is not good for our country, and I hope we can stop and never happens again.
One lesson I've learned from this last week, I talked about it earlier in the week, is Proverbs 18:17. It says, one idea seems right until the other person comes and examines him. Proverbs 18:17. And we saw that with the BuzzFeed story. Last week, we could have talked about the BuzzFeed story. Turned out to be false. A few people over the weekend could have held off and not commented about the Covington Catholic boys. And even some of the over-the-top comments about Karen Pence, now that people really understand Emmanuel Christian School. So even right now, as we're talking about Roger Stone, we don't know all the details, but sometimes just, hold back a little bit. Wait for another day or two. You might find out a little bit more. Yes, he's been indicted. Yes, the FBI showed up at his home at 6 a.m., but 2 days from now, it may be just another one of those non-stories, right?
Yeah, but again, why 19 vehicles full of people?
Just overkill
for he and his wife. Again, that looks like you're playing to the cameras, and that's not what we want the FBI, or we don't want our government doing this to make this, to really politicize this whole situation. That we should not have the criminalization of politics, which is, I think, what we're seeing a lot more of.
Wish we had more time, but first of all, IPI.org, and one of the articles that you have there also is about what's happening in Venezuela right now, and Putin and energy policy and foreign policy. We didn't get to that one, so that certainly is a place for you to find that. And of course, it's also on our website, firstliberty.org, and at least we got an update on Coach Kennedy. I feel a lot better now that I've heard you talk about that. And Penna Dexter, your commentary today, which people can obtain, Shout About Abortion. Thank you for writing about that, and thank you for the update on the New York abortion law. So thank you for joining us all today.
Thank you.
Yeah
thank
great
you.
to be here.
Well, again, I want to also thank Andrew for his help behind the scenes, Steve as well. Will Graham will be with us next week, and a variety of other guests, and so we are looking forward to a great week here on Point of View. And, of course, next Friday we'll have our weekend edition. Have a great weekend. See you back here on Point of View on Monday.
Question: do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about MediShare.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With MediShare, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with MediShare, and they actually like MediShare more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of MediShare.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less, and they like it more. No wonder MediShare is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.